now.
Welcome to the My Haunt Life podcast.
Hello and welcome to the My Haunt Life podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Russell.
Russell, we have some special guests here.
Yes, we do, Mike.
Gentlemen, can you please introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Jeff Leinenveber.
And I'm Jarrett Lantz.
From the Scout Expedition Company.
Let's all say it together.
Scout Expedition Company. And we have a show going on right now. It's our first show, in fact, called The Nest.
Which Mike and I have been lucky enough to have already done. And we highly recommend to anyone who can possibly score a ticket. So now, and actually, that's one of the things that we want to talk to you guys first is you have said that you are doing an extension, correct?
That's correct.
What's the basic information on when those tickets will be released?
So the plan is for our July extension to sell tickets on June 18th at 12 p.m. Pacific. And then we're planning on doing a short pre-sale before that for our newsletter subscribers. So you can go on to scoutexpedition.co, sign up for the newsletter there, or thenestshow.com, sign up for the newsletter there. It's the same newsletter, but we'll be doing a short pre-sale for them exclusively for like a couple hours beforehand. And if you sign up for the newsletter, we'll give you all that information before it happens.
And we do have a pretty low capacity, which we'll probably talk about. We have 2 audience members per show, so we definitely recommend if you are interested in going that you sign up for the newsletter because they'll probably go pretty quick since we have such low capacity.
And this is the 3rd extension, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, 3rd and probably final. Still trying to hash out the details, but July might be the last month of shows for the Nest.
Yeah, and that's not like a theater. I don't know. Some theater companies use it as like a way to push tickets. Like, honestly, that really might be the last extension. It's no push for selling tickets or anything like that.
Well, I mean, obviously the reaction to the Nest has been strong and extremely positive. Everyone that I know has done it has absolutely walked away from the show enchanted and loving it.
That's awesome.
So one quick question about the tickets. The one thing that is different about you guys is you do not buy individual tickets to the show.
Right.
There's 2 people per show. You buy the time slot.
Right.
So when you buy into the time slot, you can show up with 2 or 1 person, correct?
Yes.
That's
yes. Right. Total.
The reason I wanted to mention that is I know someone who approached me and was like, I'm trying to buy a ticket, and I don't understand how to get the 1 or the 2. And I was like, no, just buy the time slot.
Right.
So I wanted to mention that because you hadn't mentioned it yet. So.
Yes,
yeah,
it is a little bit confusing. And part of the reason why is because since it is a 2-person show, it'd be kind of awkward to put 2 strangers together. And also, in our experience, usually the best experiences we've had seeing immersive theater or doing escape rooms, and we're kind of in the middle of those 2 worlds, is when your entire group is your friends or your significant other, or everyone basically. And so definitely for something with such a small audience size, we wanted to make sure that it is always just you and someone you know. It is never a stranger, because that would be very awkward, we think.
Or just by yourself. And honestly, I can't say whether it's a better experience with someone or by yourself. It really depends on the mood, I guess. You both did it you both went together, and then I think, Russell, you went again.
Yeah, I came back with
somebody else. But it is a different experience somewhat.
Yes,
we've had different
definitely.
reactions based on whether you brought a friend or you brought your significant other or someone that you don't know that well. I mean, it really does vary your experience.
Well, let's set up the story a little bit, because we're talking vaguely about the experience, but the story is that when you purchase a ticket to the Nest, you're given some information.
Right, and essentially the Nest is about this woman named Josie. She passed away fairly recently, and she has this storage unit, essentially, of kind of filled with kind of the decades of her life. So all of these things that she's collected from her childhood in the 60s and kind of her kind of middle age growing up and kind of through the 70s and 80s and into her later years now. So you have the opportunity to go into the storage unit and kind of look through it and piece together kind of, what happened to this woman. You don't really know her, but kind of find objects that are important to her, and also all these audio cassette tapes that she left. So as you go through, you have a cassette player, and you're able to listen to these audio tapes. Some of them she recorded back when she was 12, when she first got the audio player as a gift from her father back in the 60s, all the way up until, right before she passed away. So that's basically how you piece the story together, by listening to these audio cassette tapes.
And so that's why the recommendation of go with someone you know is because you are going into a small storage unit to explore.
Right.
And it is very small.
Yes. Intimate, one might say.
Yes.
Yes.
So with the story and with the idea of having a storage room that people go through and find these tapes, I mean, how did that come up?
I think the main reason why this all came together is through kind of a series of figuring out what challenges we were going to have, and then designing something that took those challenges and then worked with them creatively to basically make the best of it. So we knew we were going to have a small space. We knew we weren't really going to have power, or very limited power. We knew that we weren't going to have a large budget, since it was our first show all on our own. We've worked on other shows with other companies, but this is our first all on our own. So we were trying to think of what are kind of small spaces where you could do some sort of immersive experience in. We kept going back to storage unit, or kept going back to hotel room, but for various reasons, I think as a hotel room, you have to go to a real hotel. You have to figure out with the Holiday Inn or whatever, whoever you're going to work with, all the liability and those sorts of things. And that seemed very complicated. That the idea of going back to a storage unit seemed practical and also very interesting, because if you're going through a storage unit, if you're going through a hotel, it's kind of interesting too, because you get to see a little snapshot of someone's life and what did they bring into this hotel and where did they come from and where are they going and what's in their suitcases. But a storage room almost builds on that, because now you're able to explore through basically everything that happened in the course of their lives that they've collected over time, and that really allows us to use the set as a character, because that is really that's how the story is being told, by finding all these little objects and picking this up and trying to determine what was important to her, and maybe there's a note attached to it or something written nearby, or maybe there's some something in a tape that relates to it. And so you kind of learn the significance of all these physical objects. And it seems like a storage unit is perfect for that. Maybe an attic, maybe a basement. But in our case, it's just the storage room seemed like the perfect environment for you to be exploring the story of someone's life.
Yeah, and just from our design background, we've worked with a lot of set design, and we work in the theme park industry, and so we were really intrigued by the idea of, as a design challenge, again, almost like a constraint, working towards it and seeing how we could leverage it without performers. Like, what is a show that's an immersive theater performance without a performer in the space to tell you the story? How do you tell a story through objects and through, there is a performance, and we through the audio cassette tapes, but without them physically being there, how do you, the audience, sort of change the story in your mind based on what you find? And that's what we were really keyed into discovering and figuring out.
And I can say, having done the experience twice, the story is not always the same for everyone who goes through, because the story changed quite dramatically my second time. Because we found an audio tape, and we played it the second time that, Mike and I had done it already. I was coming back with someone, and Mike and I didn't find this tape.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So my complete attitude over one character was altered by that one tape, and the one conversation on that tape completely changed my attitude. I was more sympathetic to one person in the story, and I was a lot less sympathetic to another person.
Right. And we kind of, that's one of the most interesting things about immersive theater in general, I think, is just the ability that many people see the same show, and although they probably have the same general story, everyone kind of has a slightly different experience that you can talk about afterwards. So in our case, we have, I think this isn't really revealing too much magic or anything, but we have a set number of main story tapes. So those are the ones that are a little bit easier to find as you go through the space. Or, there's one like dead ahead of you. This isn't ruining anything at all, but I literally point this out when I put people in the room. There's one dead ahead of you when you first walk in. So those are kind of the easy to find ones. Those are the main pieces of the story.
It's like an Easter egg hunt. Like we
Yeah.
try to keep the low hanging ones like out in the middle for the little kids to find, like in an Easter egg hunt. But then like the more juicy details and stuff like that might be a little bit more hidden away, or the ones like you're talking about, Russell, that will drastically change the story for you might be a little bit harder to find, and
Right.
therefore you might only find one or two of those throughout your entire experience.
And almost everyone asks at the end, but no, you did not find all the tapes. No one finds all the tapes. It's basically impossible, and it's kind of designed to be that way.
Right.
Where the way I kind of describe it is a little bit like a Venn diagram, where everyone gets like the 70-80% in the middle of kind of those core story tapes. And then there's, depending on which tapes you find, you get a little bit extra flavor on, one character versus another. And Russell, when you were talking about, you found a certain tape that changed your perspective on somebody, that's one example of that. But then you might have found another tape a different time that maybe would have turned that on its head a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Also, I think again, like because the performer isn't there, and that human connection isn't necessarily there embodied. You kind of bring in your own human experience and your own life experience into the show. So because it's interesting, without spoiling it, it's interesting to hear that it totally changed your impression of that character.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've even heard the opposite, and they hear that same exact tape, and now they support the other character. And so it really does depend on the order in which you find things, what you already know versus what you don't, and your own life, I guess, what you bring into the show yourself and how you fill in those gaps. Because the tapes kind of jump timelines back and forth, and that also, like filling in those gaps, I think informs a lot of what the story ends up being for you.
That's a very valid point. And I'll be the first to admit, when I heard that tape the second time, I got very judgy on that character. I was just like, how dare you?
But that's awesome. Right. That's like all of it's valid. Like a lot of, I think it's almost like a tentpole of the immersive theater genre. It's like any experience that you have, I don't think that it should be determined that that's a improper like way to view it or not. It's all valid, no matter what you bring out of the story. It's like we wanted it to be okay. It's fine. It's kind of left that way on purpose.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I think that's one of the strengths of the show, personally, the fact that it is that versatile and that ever changing for everyone. So and I've it's like I have people at work who've done the show now, and we've compared notes and said like, hey, like what
did you find?
What did you find? And what did you think of that sequence?
And had you found significantly different things or mostly overlap?
We found mostly overlapping stuff.
Okay.
We did. We found mostly overlapping stuff.
Right.
So no one's found all the tapes, but has there been like one tape that no one has ever found yet?
There is one in particular that I would say maybe 5% or less of people have found.
Maybe,
I mean,
even less, maybe like 2 or 3 people total.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say it's like super well hidden. It just, I'm not sure. I think it's just in a little bit of an inconspicuous spot to check.
Now I'm intrigued.
Now, going off of that, a lot of people that would listen to this, me included, because especially with my first time through, you go into, I'm going to find all the tapes. I'm going to do this. Oh my God, I know it's not an escape room, but I need to find everything. That's the mentality I had. And I think a lot of people have. How do you combat that? Because that's not the point.
Right. Well, I think we try and do a couple things, both in the check-in process of kind of reminding people that it's about listening to the audio tips as they find them, and not trying to rush through it too much. But I think on the more practical end, we try to not number the tapes, not tell people how many there are, not put a date on them, not
there's no ticking clock inside the room,
right?
Like that's got this sense of dread with it,
right? Kind of allow people to if we ask, we'll say no, you didn't find them all, but allow people to think like you found everything essentially when you came out. Like we're not going to lie to them, but people probably feel satisfied enough because they don't know what they missed necessarily. And again, we just try and set that up multiple times during the check-in. Not by saying you're not going to find everything, but just by saying, like, listen to the other tapes as you find them. Just kind of, don't rush through it, and kind of enjoy your time while you're in there. And I think that hopefully kind of switches people's mindset. And I do usually say also that specifically to kind of turn that like escape room part of your brain off a little bit, depending on if someone has done a lot of escape rooms before, I'll kind of ask during the check-in, and depending on kind of what I found out from that, I'll just say, like, okay, escape rooms are awesome, we love escape rooms, but like, don't do that same thing here. The same thing that we would do. I mean, it's, if I go to escape room, I'm gonna run in and like rip everything apart and try and like throw everything into a pile in the center and like start screaming out like, I'm lifting the rug up, like I'm flipping the furniture over, what did you guys find? But we just try and tell people multiple times, like, please don't do that here.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about you didn't number the tapes, because I know when Mike and I did it, one of the things that I tried to do is I was trying to keep the tapes in the order that we found them, thinking
right.
that there's got to be a pattern,
Right.
And then there just became so many tapes, I realized, like, no, there's no pattern here.
Right.
It dawned on me about halfway through of like, oh, I am trying to like find a pattern or a series of this, and I was like, no, the adventure is just playing them.
Right.
So, but yeah, I had to switch it off midway through of like trying to figure out like, wait, which tape should be next, and like it doesn't matter, because you're going to get something no matter what order you play them in.
Right. And we do kind of, I don't think this really spoils anything either, but there are kind of separate spaces that are in this storage unit, and kind of the first space you're in is more focused on her early life. But there's also a couple tapes that we peppered in there that are, much later in her life. So we kind of purposely place things somewhat out of order, which just, again, kind of changes people's perception. I don't know how to say it without giving too much away, but you might, if you listen to even two tapes in different orders, it just might change the way you view them. I know that's very vague, but I don't know how to say it in a better way without spoiling anything.
And it is somewhat designed, again, going off the Easter egg analogy, because some of the tapes are super easy to find and they're kind of in plain sight. We are controlling somewhat. I mean, we're not in there physically with you to make you listen to certain tapes, but we try to nudge people along to find certain ones first versus others.
Right.
Whenever people create something new, there's always that fear of, this is something that nobody's done before. Oh my God, I don't know if anyone will like this. With you guys, you created something, and I mean, I think people are giving you the highest compliment. You created a new way of storytelling, which, first off, congratulations. And I think that shows that this is the third time you're remounting it and selling tickets, because the previous shows have all sold out like super, super quick. When you were creating this, I mean, most people aren't arrogant and think like, oh, my show's going to sell out, it's going to be awesome.
No,
but like,
we definitely did not think that.
No way.
I mean, what? Like, how did you think? And then all of a sudden, your runs sell out. Like, how is that? Like,
Yeah, it's been a crazy experience. And also, this is probably a perfect time to say, like, thank you to everyone listening to this podcast who has seen the show already.
Yeah.
We are so grateful. Actually, people who have come from, from kind of like the haunt community, if you will, are like our favorite people to come to the show. We love them. They're the perfect mix of having seen like immersive stuff, having done escape rooms. Oh my God, they're great. They do everything perfectly. We love them. So basically, thank you so much.
Yeah, usually, like, if you haven't had a lot of experience with this, we have a means of helping you within the story, like nudging you along. And with any guest who comes from like your podcast or other haunt podcasts, or No Proscenium or something like that in the immersive theater world, they're always like hands down the best and like most lovely people to talk to afterwards, and are so supportive and awesome. So yeah, they've been great.
Yeah, but now that we've gushed about everyone, thank you so much for coming. Back to the question. I think when we were putting it together, we were like, maybe we can like get some of our friends to come.
And
We're like,
family.
we don't.
Like,
Yeah,
I know
maybe
a couple
we're like
people.
family. We're come. We're really like big people. I don't know. Like looking back on it, it was kind of crazy, but we're like, we're just going to make something and like see if it works. And if it doesn't work at the end of the day, we'll be out, some money. But again, you guys have been, or people who haven't been, it's not a huge budget show. We're not mounting Sleep No More for $10 million or something. So because our budget was fairly small and the experience is fairly small with only 2 people, we could kind of just take a risk and hope it paid off. And if it didn't, we didn't lose out too much. But really, kind of transitioning a little bit, I think really what influenced it and almost what we kind of built off of was a lot of narrative video games. We've talked about this a couple of times in the past too, but games like Gone Home or Firewatch or BioShock, or I haven't played it yet, but What Remains
of Edith Finch or Oxenfree, a lot of narrative-driven video games that are becoming more and more popular these days.
Right, where in essence, each one is different, but in many of them, you're learning story by finding some sort of audio log, or maybe you're interacting with another character who's unseen, but you're all interacting over audio. And so that was one of the core things we thought was interesting, of like, how can we tell the story, how can we bring out character through pre-recorded dialogue or through audio only. And yeah, we just wanted to try and do it. So I guess it was like maybe not that many people had done it in like a physical manifestation before, but we were lucky enough to have these great examples of digital media and video games and stuff that had kind of broken this ground already, and we kind of looked a little bit to that. So interactive, video games and things like that were definitely a huge influence along the way.
Yeah, and I think we kind of even stumbled upon the whole like quasi escape room-ness of the experience. Like initially, again, our design challenge was telling stories through these audio cassettes. That's the hook that we were like really excited about. And so when we started designing the space and we started figuring out the layout and like how you would progress through this space and find these audio tapes, we quickly realized that some sort of literal gating would need to happen. You would need to somehow chapter off or like segment the story into acts almost, so that it felt a bit more cohesive of a story. Because at first we were like playing around with, are people just going to go into this space and it's going to be a free-for-all? But is that aspirational, or is that fulfilling enough? And then we sort of were like, well, okay, if there is going to be some light puzzling, like how do we implement that? And again, that's where we kind of fell back on the influences from video games, or even like early 90s, like Myst and those 90s point and click adventures where
Seventh Guest.
Yeah.
Where it's not like super challenging and it's not going to keep you from progressing for hours or something. You're going to get it as long as you explore and look, try to go through the space and figure out the story. Like, it all is, they're not meant to be these huge roadblocks. They're just supposed to be like little speed bumps along the way.
And all of them reveal some aspect of the character of Josie. Like, every one of them is somehow tied to something in the room, a prop, a note, some piece of information, and it just all advances the story. It's all story driven, which I think is one of the main differences between what you have and your typical escape room. Is a typical escape room is usually a situation. You guys created an environment, and there's a story to be found there. And it's fascinating to go through, and I really enjoyed going through it twice because Mike and I approached it very differently than Deb and I approached it. And by the way, I want to mention something. After the conversation that you guys and I had and Deb had after my second time through with her, for my birthday, she bought me Firewatch.
Oh, nice! Yes. Did you play it?
I'm just like, I've started the intro to it basically.
You named your dog and everything.
So I'm just getting into it, but it was based on, because I'm Mike and I have talked a little bit about the podcast. I am a newbie gamer. And like, after the conversation with you guys, Deb told me, we talked afterward, and she said, "Oh, like, you like the escape room. You're like, you would enjoy this type of game."
Right.
And so she hunted it down for my birthday, and she gave it to me for my birthday, and it's
that's
sitting
awesome.
on my little system over there, and I just haven't had a chance to explore it yet.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is so awesome about those games too, is they're really accessible to anybody. You don't have to be like a gamer, and there aren't a lot of game mechanics in it that would require you to like have amazing hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, you're not like shooting people. And
there's no competition.
Well, like you said, it was like I'm going through the forest.
Right, and learning a story
Okay,
along
cool.
the way, and talking to a woman over, a
Yeah.
walkie-talkie, and
Exploring and finding props and like, oh wait, what does this sound like? It's immersive theater.
Yeah.
oh,
Manifested
totally,
in a video game.
totally.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions about how you got to where you are, because
Okay.
we've talked about immersive theater, and like you guys work for a theme park design company.
Yes.
You've said that in interviews that you've talked about that.
Right.
One question about, you created this environment. How did you arrive at the title of the show, The Nest? Having gone through the show, I'm going to say,
Right.
like, I totally understand. I totally get it. But how did you arrive at that title?
I think, again, without spoiling it, it is central to the story's plot, but also has many different meanings that we felt applied to the story, because it's a place,
It's like a collection
it's
of
a collection of
things.
items, right, for the storage room. Like, it kind of plays into the theme of, hoarding lots of different items throughout your entire life and creating this little home for yourself.
That's the key word, home. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, is because when I was going through it, it's like, we joke, I'm the one always about the feels and the emotion and all that. I really did feel the sense that, like, everything that you encounter physically, and you encounter a lot of stuff in this environment, everything that you encounter is a reflection of somewhere where Josie had lived and been. And it is a physical aspect of her homes of the past. And it was very clear to me. It actually hit me harder the second time, I will admit. But yeah, it's just like, and so I walked away from the second time. I didn't even think about the title after the first time. But after the second time, I was like, oh my God, it's so perfect. So
Right.
that's why I wanted to ask that question.
Right, and then of course there's other aspects that kind of play into it too. That
Yes.
we won't spoil here, but yeah. Again, like Jeff said, there's a couple different meanings that this was. It probably takes everyone a long time to come up with the name, but we were kicking around names for the whole time we were building it, I think, and then we just kept coming back to the Nest over and over again. We're like, that's it.
Yeah, and for a while too, we were trying to almost like create something more than the Nest. We were adding words to it and making it
make
a
it
longer
poetic
title and
and,
poetic, and we just kept coming back to no, it doesn't ring true enough. So we just kept coming back to the Nest, even if we are going to be in competition with a high-tech AC brand.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Hopefully their trademark doesn't extend to immersive theater as well.
No, it's a very fitting title, that's for sure. Now, you guys, as I was mentioning earlier, you guys come from theme park design companies where you guys
Right.
work, correct?
Yes.
And people who create shows like this come from everything from LARPing to, like, you guys are theme parks oriented, haunt people, traditional theater people.
Right.
What influences you? What do you gravitate toward? What do you guys enjoy exploring in your time? Not that you've had a lot of free time recently, but
I think what I particularly enjoy, and I think what we're able to bring from kind of the theme park world into immersive theater is, again, kind of the aspect of world building and building, creating an environment that's rich with detail and where everything seems purposely placed, because that is very much a theme park principle where, there's the overall story of the land, and then every building is part of the story of the land, and then every facade of the building and every balcony that's on the building is part of the story, and every little wrought iron detail that's on the balcony. It's like from the overall story basically feeds every little detail that goes into the play. So, and when you have kind of a strong overall story of what that space is supposed to be, every decision comes very naturally. So I think that's what I really like, is kind of creating the world, creating the set, creating the environment. And that's definitely what I do during the day in theme park design as well.
Yeah, it's just the all-encompassing story where every single detail, right, is in service to the story and is in service to the theme, and there's nothing that's left untouched from that. And you can go there and you can be completely immersed, even if that word, starts to lose its meaning after being used like a billion times. But it truly is, I think, one of the definitions of immersive. It's like every single thing you do at a theme park is, especially Disneyland, obviously, it's like from the rides to the food that you get to the hopefully the merchandise that you buy to the pavement, everything is somehow playing to this overarching theme.
And I think another thing from theme park design that kind of plays into that, and also is something we try to add into the nest, is the idea that this whole story is written even if it's not communicated to the guests. So, one example for that is the queue in Indiana Jones at Disneyland, where, there are, pages and pages written about, every single room that you're passing through, and what's the trap that's in the room, and where did the explorers come, how did they walk through the space, and what does this door that's like really an exit door, but, it looks like it's a door that leads off to some other chamber, and it has a sign on it that says it's leading to that chamber, and there's a big map in one of the spaces that's, a hand-drawn like expedition map of what the queue creatively is supposed to be and where all these other hidden chambers are that you never see. And because there's so much thought put into it, obviously we were very young when Indiana Jones was being designed, for example. So we had nothing to do with it. But, that just allows as a designer to say, okay, all of this story is here. So now I know like what color that should be. I know like what the handle on the door should be. I know, what the texture of the wall should be, because everything, like you said, is every little detail is in service to that overall story that's so well crafted.
And you feel like there's a sense of depth when you go to when you're in Adventureland, you feel like every single proprietor to every single shop, like there is a history written for them and that character, and every single detail has a lot of story meaning behind it, even if at first glance it's not apparent, it's there. And you'd or when you're going through the queue in Pirates or going through New Orleans Square, and you see that door up on the balcony, and you just... there is so much immersion within that land and so many good details that it just feels so authentic, so that you just trust, even if there's nothing behind that door, like you said, it's an exit door or something,
right?
You just it feels authentic, it feels legitimate to the story.
It's funny you're talking about Disneyland. One of my favorite places that everything that you guys have talked about is the Roger Rabbit ride in Disneyland.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Mike and I were at Disneyland with a group one time, and Mike made a comment about how much he liked the Roger Rabbit ride, and I just very casually went, I've actually never been on it, and the look on his face, the horror, just like, we're going right now. And he literally took me over to the Roger Rabbit ride and you will experience this.
And you will like it.
And I loved it.
That's awesome.
But it's everything that you just said, is everything is in every detail. Literally the grates and the floor and what you see below them are in service to the story and in service to the world.
Right.
And it's wonderful.
Yeah, and you can almost, again, going now back to the nest, it's like you fill in the gaps, and that's really where that really good story comes from. It's even if the door is there, a few little contextual clues could be put on that door or in that little area that tell a little bit of a story, but you fill in the rest on your own, and that's where the real fun, I think, in a lot of those places comes from. So again, our show, it's we try to carry that lesson on and try not to give you too much. We just create these hints, and maybe we figured it out, but we don't deliver every single line of story just sitting out there for you to consume. It's no, it's hidden, or it's there, but just not in plain sight. It's for you to kind of dig and find, and even if it's the smallest little detail that one or two people might find, it's worth it if those one or two people find it.
Right.
Do you think you'd ever release all the audio from all the tapes at one point, once the run is over or something in the future?
We keep kicking that idea around and are trying to figure out the best way to do it. So I would say maybe. We're hoping we can find the right creative way to do it. I think we don't want to just put the MP3 files online or something.
Yeah,
I don't know,
right.
because it'll kind of take away from
Be a click and
the
point
experience.
escape room game.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
That would be like it'd fit so well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We can make a video game
Or
out
if
of it.
CDs were made, each one would be different in a different order,
Oh yeah.
like always shuffle
Oh, that's
type of thing.
interesting.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. I know. Yeah, it's definitely something we keep kicking around.
Yeah, because even for people who aren't able to see the show, like we feel like it would still be fun to even the act of going through this collection of audio cassette tapes and choosing which ones you want to listen to first and what order you want to listen to them in could be fun even by itself. I mean, obviously not the same as the real show, but might be something worth exploring, worth talking about.
Right. And there's also something about listening to the tapes on the cassette player itself. So, I mean, is there a way we could give people actual cassettes, but then they have to have a cassette player? So there's
They're becoming easier to find these days. I feel like
Now they're all,
cassettes
like,
are
cool
becoming
and, like,
back.
hipster.
I saw one at Urban Outfitters the other day, and I was like, wow,
it's the whole
we've circled,
progression,
we've made the lap. We're back.
Yeah, because LPs were in, vinyl was in, and now we're going to cassettes. And
we should just sell them as a packet. Urban Outfitters sell the tapes as
You
like
can
a
get your Space Jam hat and your cassette player.
and your Nest cassette tapes. There you go. Yeah, but if
gonna
we do
be
release
rich.
them, I feel like it has to be on an actual cassette, that you're playing on an actual cassette player.
that's funny.
And so the Nest Part 2 will be on 8 tracks, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there you go. I know that'd be so cool to do all different types of audio formats without like wax cylinders and like records. And all that. That'd be so cool.
And then pretty soon we'll be just back to like actors, and then at that point we've made the loop again.
Then you'll be considered retro.
Yeah. Or we'll just wait 10 years and we'll do something on like an iPod. Or
Yeah,
like,
you find a series of iPod Nanos, and you listen to the playlists.
Actually, we went to an escape room where we needed to use iPods.
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
Nice.
It is
That's
hard
like-
to imagine,
that's like-
but I mean, it's one of those things where it's just so hard to imagine that sort of thing becoming nostalgic and
Right.
retro. But I mean,
It definitely will.
the march of time, the slow march of time, will make it so. Like,
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think if like 20 years ago or something, you told people like, there's going to be this show and you're going to like listen to audio cassette tapes, people would be like, that sounds so stupid. Like, that's what I do every day. It would be like, but now it's cool because no one does it anymore.
Now, the show takes place at a private residence in a regular, everyday neighborhood. How have you dealt with neighbors, for the first thing, and having people, just random people, show up all the time?
Well,
it is super low capacity, so we haven't had a problem, like, really at all, because it's just we're bringing a few people in at a time, and there is not a lot of noise in the show. It's not very loud at all.
we kind of meet people at a street corner, so they have kind of the opportunity to park more on like a commercial area, and we meet them in a commercial area. So we just try to keep, anything that could be noisy or people like kind of milling about or loitering, as you know.
It's very
Always-
low impact to our neighbors.
Right. Right. Yeah, we kind of meet them there, and then we'll bring them to the actual space itself. And yeah, like you're saying, with 2 people a night, 2 people a show, it's very, very low impact. I definitely wouldn't recommend doing a large show in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I think actually Delusion always runs into that problem.
Yes, they
and
have.
John Braver, I feel like, talks about it constantly, and I don't think this is spoiling anything either, but I remember just like one of the last things he had said, publicly was after kind of the last show was that might be one of the last shows that he does in a residence, which is unfortunate, but totally understandable because they have hundreds of people a night, and you have to have parking lots and bathrooms and security and all these things. So
It's the constant struggle with any immersive theater company, a space, particularly in Los Angeles. It's like probably number one hurdle that you have to jump over first before you even start on anything creative whatsoever, which is hard because it's kind of a cart before the horse situation. Like you sort of have to lock down your location and then see what works there.
Right. Which I know Delusion has had that problem several times. They've been very open about the frustration that causes. Mike has been a home haunter, and I've been involved with a couple of things that, like you mentioned, hotels earlier.
Right.
And, I've actually staged something here So yeah, it does become a factor. Noise becomes a factor, and
Right.
yeah, you do have to deal with those issues.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, if anyone who's listening is interested in doing their own thing at home, keep it very small,
Very quiet.
very small, and be
it
very nice to
simple.
your neighbors, and everything will probably be okay.
And that's actually one of my next questions is, LA has a huge home haunter scene. It's people that do things for the love of it because they're creative and they just create at their house.
Right.
With all the things that have happened in LA and in Oakland with the ghost ship fire,
Right.
And LA cracking down on permitting, do you see more home theater in the future happening, kind of like how home haunts were happening, because people have ideas, but they don't have money, they can't get permits,
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a vicious cycle. I think it stunts the growth of immersive theater and haunts significantly. I think that if you can't, get out of a low capacity situation, then, fiscally, you're just like, it's not very sustainable if you can't make any money off of it, or if you're constantly losing or just breaking even. It's really not enough to keep going and to keep growing the entire scene as a whole and lift everybody up at the same time. It's like, so while I think it can remain like a passion project, and there's nothing wrong with that, I don't know if it's really viable, like unless there's some extra support in terms of making spaces available in Los Angeles and helping out on the insurance side and all that, which is a huge issue that everybody's working on. As a whole, I'm not sure.
I think there's almost a little bit of a donut, if you will, where it's relatively easy to do something that's small that you can do at your house, and then if you have a lot of money, you could do something like Tension or Sleep No More, Then She Fell, or rent some space and do a big production. But there's kind of that middle part of the donut that's really difficult, where you don't have a big budget yet, but you want to do something larger than what you could do typically at a home. But the Willows might be a good example of something that kind of, I haven't seen it yet, but fits kind of in the middle of the donut. That seems like it's going very well. They have 18 audience members per show. It's in a private house, but it must be a larger house. So you guys have seen it, right?
It is,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, a larger home. So the 18 people must not be a big burden on the rest of the neighborhood. So it seems like maybe they've started to crack that code of how to do kind of a medium scale show. But it definitely, I think that is the hardest. Small is easy, large is easy, assuming you have tons of money and resources. It's just like that middle piece. How do you balance those two?
You mentioned Delusion. Now, if I'm not mistaken, haven't you guys worked with Delusion at one point?
We worked the last 2 shows on Delusion.
So it was 2014, the show of, what was the name? I'm so bad. What was that? What?
Lies Within?
Yes, Lies Within. Oh my gosh. So the story about the author.
writer.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and all of
Elena
her kind of characters
Fitzgerald.
coming to life. Yeah, oh my god, that show was awesome. The house was beautiful, beautiful old kind of like storybook mansion
Right, it
almost.
was.
Yeah, oh my god, loved it. And then we worked on the 2016 version with all the vampires. And
His
everything, which is
Crimson
like-
Queen.
Yeah,
His
His
Crimson
Crimson
Queen. I know, I forget all the names. So
Now-
bad.
But we the first year we just reached out to John and were really passionate about.
We had seen the show. We'd
Yeah.
seen 2 years of the show and we loved it.
We were
It was-
already fans
yeah.
of this sort of thing and his shows in particular, and we were just sort of trying to dip our toe in the water in terms of helping out on these types of productions. Like, we had done stuff at work, but wanted to branch out and try different things. And so John gave us that opportunity to help out in a pretty limited capacity that first year. We were
Right.
helping with prop shopping and that sort of stuff, assisting the production team. But then the following year for His Crimson Queen, we had a bit more of an active role in helping design the show on the front end and making design choices and helping out with the physical selecting of props and building the spaces and the whole psychology of the spaces and how the audience will move through it and all that.
Right. Yeah, that was great. There was kind of a team of 4 of us doing the kind of set design and set decoration, and then working under the production designer. And I mean, that's one of the most fun shows to work on because the houses themselves are so amazing. These like beautiful old mansions.
Yeah,
Many of them in the West Adams district. I guess it kind of depends on the year.
Yeah, they
Most
do
of
the
them have
heavy
been, except for that
lifting.
church. Yeah, yeah. It's like the houses. The houses are already amazing. So you have such good bones to work with, and then it's just kind of figuring out what is the story in each space, what character, quote unquote, lives in each space, and kind of how do you lightly decorate it kind of to match that part of the story. But again, it's like the houses are so amazing. And that's probably one of the best parts of immersive theater is being able to, you know, see a performance in some sort of amazing architectural space. You know, another example is Wicked Lit or Johnny Part 3 at the Mountain View Mausoleum. It's like just being there, it's so beautiful, and there's the marble columns everywhere, and the giant, you know, double height space with stained glass windows. It's just like an inspiring space to be in.
Definitely. I mean, the environments for those are shows are listed, and Then She Fell in New York by Third Rail.
Right.
It's like now, did you guys work with Third Rail at some point?
We did briefly for a small project back in October, actually, like on Halloween or like that
Oh,
week
yeah,
of
that's right,
Halloween
yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Third Rail was part of a conference in downtown LA that was about like the VR, like Oculus Story Studio that they put on.
Oh, interesting.
And they invited Third Rail to sort of do a very bespoke performance centered around the theme of that convention. And so through a friend of a friend, we like basically were put in contact with them and helped them wrangle together a show in like relatively a really short
Like
amount
2
of time.
weeks.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was about 2 weeks from start to finish. And then the actual, that's just a sourcing of all the props and stuff that we were trying to find. And then the actual load in and set design itself was sort of just off the cuff within like 24 hours.
It sounds like you were doing like on the fly rapid world building.
Yeah, it was
exactly.
so fun. I mean, we just showed up with like a cargo van full of stuff, and we sat there, you know, with the Third Rail team and with the actors, and we just were like, let's just move some stuff. Like, okay, that chase, like that looks good here. And then the scene, you know, this was again more like the directors and the actors would figure out like, okay, and this is what the scene could be. And then like, okay, here's some other cool pieces. Let's like put this in a corner and let's figure out like what could be a scene here and how do we tie it all together. It was really cool just seeing, you know, their creative process and how quickly they were able to take. They had no idea what we were bringing, and you know, we just brought all this stuff, and
We had
were
no
all
idea
able
what
to
they
just
were
create it
thinking
together.
either.
Oh, that's
Essentially.
interesting.
Like we
Yeah.
had a very, very like on a very basic like
About
story
photography,
level.
kind
Yeah.
of, and visual storytelling. But yeah,
it was
besides that, it was like,
It was a fun design exercise because, you know, I think so often with shows like this, they're usually slow building. I mean, like for The Nest, we'd been thinking about it for a couple of years and then we were building it in earnest for like 3 or 4 months. But this was literally just like, see what you can do in
Right.
24 hours. And this
Right.
awesome piece comes from it. It's like, wow, really refreshing and sort of makes you realize that sometimes if you just follow your gut and you try to put something up, that time constraint can actually breed like pretty amazing work with, you know, the right group of people.
yeah, it helps to have very talented actors there. So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, that company is very strong,
yes.
and that company works really well they're about the emotion that comes from the space.
Right.
So, and I was lucky enough to do a workshop not long ago with one of the creative team, and it was just like, and just to hear them talk about exactly what you said is, okay, we've got this Chaise Lounge, we've got this. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does it mean in the environment?
Right.
You know, and then how do I interact with it physically or emotionally? So, and it was fascinating hearing some of that process. But what did you? It just sounds like it was a blast for one thing.
Oh yeah.
But I assume every time you walk away from something like the Delusion experience and the Third Rail experience, like, and you have the theme park design experience, like you have this ever-growing experience level, it seems like. So as you guys grow, what do you see in your future? What do you see you guys, do you have an agenda? Do you know what's next after The Nest?
We've definitely been thinking about some things, and I'm sure they'll change a million times, so we probably won't get like too specific about what we maybe want to do next, but I think whatever it is, we want to do something very different from The Nest.
Yeah, 180.
A complete 180. Probably something larger, probably something with actors, Probably not, going through a Space and Fun audio cassette tapes. Maybe in the future we'll do that again, but a different story. But I think not for our next show.
The remix.
But I think no matter what, yeah, there we go, perfect.
But the alternate
Perfect.
title.
Yeah, that's
The Nest,
awesome.
the remix.
There we go.
Part 2.
Build it. But I think no matter what we do, I think we want to stick to telling stories that are fairly relatable. So, The Nest in particular is a story about, again, like we talked about, this woman, Josie, who definitely has some dramatic events happen in her life, but isn't necessarily that dissimilar from, any of us. I mean, she has a happy childhood. She, goes through many of the stages of life that the average person goes through, but just along the way, things don't necessarily work out as planned. So there's something very powerful, I think, and kind of lets you connect to the characters when you're telling a story that is pretty relatable about kind of a quote-unquote everyday person. So I think no matter what we do next, we will stick to that, telling stories kind of about everyday people.
Yeah, I mean, The Nest is essentially a character study. It's a very human story. Again, we try not to get too grand in our scope in terms of... the story can be poetic at times, but it never gets too symbolic or anything. It never gets away from itself. I would say that, again, you're hearing all the dialogue is pretty simple.
It's like how anyone would talk.
Anybody
It's
would
not,
speak in a
Shakespearean, or it's just how someone in the 60s would talk.
Right. So, that I think is one of our design goals in the future, is to continue that. And I also think it makes it very accessible for all types of people. And that was also our goal with The Nest and our future endeavors, is that it's great when you attract the niche audience and that they appreciate it, but we're kind of in the long game in terms of, like, we want to bring in new people. We want to have a mix of both people who love this sort of stuff and people who've never done anything like this before. Like, some of the best, most rewarding moments in talking with people who've come to see the show are some of the people who have never done they're like, I've never done anything like this. I found it off of Thrillist or
Right.
Eventbrite, which is like always is like a hit or miss most of the time. But for the people that really enjoyed it, it's like, wow, you've just converted somebody into, like, falling in love with this type of work, which is awesome. And it only helps everybody to keep continuing to expand this breadth of audience.
Oh yeah, it's definitely rewarding to see kind of the people come out and having kind of no idea what it is when they go in, and then having like a semi-transformative experience. It probably sounds more grand than it really is, but the thing that always sticks out in my mind, it was kind of funny, is that this couple came up from Orange County, a kind of father and a mother, and I think the mother was more into immersive theater, and she kind of dragged her husband along, and he was definitely a very like straight face, very kind of like serious guy, and the whole time he was going through, he was very particular about everything, and we didn't know maybe he doesn't really like it, but that's okay. He's probably like not too into theater and things like that, and that's totally fine. And then he came out, and even after he came out, he's like, oh good, that was good, but still very straight faced. But then as we're walking down the alley, he starts talking more, and this guy who's like kind of like, again,
military,
kind of like a military type persona almost. But then he's like, it reminded me of my childhood of building box forts and things under my mom's kitchen table. We're like, yes. We're this guy who the whole time he was very again, he
it's
just
like
kind of
that Pixar moment where it goes back to the character he reminded of himself when he's a little child, remembering playing with making forts out of cardboard boxes and stuff. And so it's that sort of experience in talking with people that you're like, yeah, you've connected, you've hit on something that's really emotionally deep and shared amongst all sorts of people, regardless if you're into this sort of thing or not.
Right.
Well, I actually, we have questions that Mike and I were talking about, things we wanted to ask you guys, and I'm so glad that you went there, because one of the things that we talked about is reaction to this show. So what has surprised you I mean, that's a wonderful moment that you just revealed. I mean, that's, and you're right. It is, and it's not. Yes, it might sound lofty to say transformational, but no, it is. Especially if people aren't familiar with this format.
Right.
So, like, what are the surprising moments? Like what has first of all, has anyone gotten really claustrophobic? Because it's not a tight space.
Right.
Like, like Mike and I have done haunts where we're in like 2 feet by 2 feet. So it's like claustrophobia, not a good gauge.
It's all relative.
It's all relative.
Being stuck in a
exactly.
coffin or something like that.
But been there, done that. So
I mean, we try to be upfront that it is a really small space, and hopefully we've communicated that to people beforehand before they choose to buy a ticket or not. But yeah, I think some
had
people.
one problem where, like,
we've had a handful
yeah.
of little problems here and there with people in the space, and I guess you don't know until you're actually there if you can tolerate the cramped
that's interesting.
aspect of the space, because it does, like, and on purpose we've designed it so that boxes are kind of leaning over you and they're very threatening, like they might fall over on you, and we've created some very narrow spaces that open up into larger ones, and that compress and that contract and expand aspect of the design, I think, can trigger some people if they have that sort of problem. But overall, I would say
very
basically
few.
very few.
And I think the reactions have been mostly positive, which has been, wonderful. I mean, I think some people, it seems quite different if people go by themselves or in a group of two. I think if people go by themselves, they sometimes have a little bit more chance to kind of reflect and maybe get like deeper into the story and maybe more emotionally connected because there's not another person there. I don't know. It's just kind of a very different experience when you're there by yourself. So those people maybe, some people end up like crying at the end, which is like, obviously,
it's very touching.
Yeah. As a creator, I mean, I think that's powerful, again, to kind of see that someone had such a connection to the story and a connection to the characters. But yeah, I mean, overall, the response has been definitely positive. Some people haven't liked it, and that's totally fine. I think the hard thing about immersive theater is we try to set up as much as we can in advance of kind of what the expectation should be, but we don't want to give anything away, really. So we kind of try to say what type of experience it is. It's like a little bit like immersive theater. It's a little bit like an escape room. It's kind of in the middle of these things. But, I think sometimes people maybe come thinking it's going to be like completely immersive theater, and then they're like disappointed it's maybe a little bit more escape roomy than they think, or
more
maybe the other way
interactive.
around, or maybe people, they bought a ticket and they didn't really know what it is, and I remember a couple of people came when doing check-in, and they're like, oh, like we don't have to like do anything, right? Like I don't really want to do anything. And like, oops. Yeah,
kind of.
So I think, some of it has to do with the expectations, but I don't think it's on the fault of the audience at all. It's just, again, with immersive theater, like you want / escape rooms, you want to give people an idea kind of what it is without spoiling anything. So sometimes, since we're not 100% clear about everything you'll be experiencing, people maybe just have a different idea in their head before they go, and then maybe don't latch onto it as much as others, but. Thankfully, those experiences have been fewer than the positive experiences.
Yeah, and in terms of surprises, maybe it's not even a surprise necessarily, but like it's been really interesting to assess how people go through the space and to see how different people react to different things. And you just get a lot of different personality types in the space, and it's been interesting to understand that and to try to appease all sorts of personality types. So some people love to rifle through little details and get really transfixed onto every single little book and page and magazine, and that's totally fine. And then you get other people who just want to stand in the middle of a space and like turn with their flashlight, and they don't want to touch anything really. And so it's like, from a design perspective, the show has evolved quite a bit over the last couple months. We've changed little things here and there to try to best assume for all those different personalities, because again, we're not in there to physically force you to do anything, but you want to make sure that no matter what type of person you are, you still are able to get through it.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit like a Goldilocks problem where you don't want it to be too easy, you don't want it to be too hard, you want it to be right down the middle. You want everyone to finish in about like 45 to 50 minutes or so. But it is kind of an interesting challenge to try and design something that everyone will get through in that amount of time, regardless of their experience level, how many shows they've done before and what shows they were, and their personality type. It's just been very interesting trying to design to that, because I think one of the differences that we didn't explain before is that, unlike an escape room, since we're more on kind of the immersive theater side, everyone gets to the end. It's not, where there's a clock and then, at a certain minute marker, we pull people out of the space. It's, everyone always gets all the way to the end. So that's kind of been a design challenge to, again, get kind of all of these different personality types. None of them are better than any other. Like every personality type is totally fine, but trying to get them all kind of to be somewhat on the same track and get to kind of the end in about the same amount of time.
The name of your company is Scout Expedition Company. How did that come about?
I think, again, we went through like a ton of different ideas, but I feel like Scout Expedition Company sort of tackled, or at least in terms of like its name and the impression that we were trying to give through the name and the branding and all that, was that this is about like fun. This is about fun, aspirational experiences that don't take themselves too seriously. I mean, the content can be serious and adult, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, again, focusing on accessibility. All different types of people can come see this show. And we might offer a wide range of genres. While this one might be more serious in tone, the next one could be a comedy, or the next one after that could be all ages, for children to grandmothers. But keeping it so that again, inspiring the sense of adventure and exploration and fun. We kept just coming back to fun being like a big part of it, and not being too serious.
That's what I got from it when I went to your website. Totally.
Cool.
So, as fans, what are you looking forward to in the next couple months? Like any shows coming up, or?
Yeah, I'm going to be seeing Apartment 8 at Fringe Festival, so
Me
I'm
too.
definitely very excited about that. I've heard so much about it. I think every other time it's been mounted, I don't know, maybe we must have been working on some project or something, or over the past couple months there's been so many shows that we've missed because of the Nest or other things we've been working on. But Apartment 8, really excited about.
The Willows, for sure.
Yes, the Willows.
Yeah. Well, because of the show going on from Thursday to Sunday, we've just basically had no lives. So
Right.
it's, all of these amazing shows are coming and going, and we're like, oh no, we really want to see them.
I know.
But fortunately, it sounds like the Willows will keep going, and so in July, we're hoping to catch that.
And then I think on kind of the video game side, Tacoma,
Oh.
which is the next game by the creators of Gone Home. So we don't know too much about it. I've kind of tried to avoid reading too much about it, but I am assuming it is a similar style where you are, learning a story by walking around and looking at things and listening to things and seeing things, and you're not shooting people or anything. Again, it's about storytelling through video games, so definitely very excited about that, but trying to avoid any spoilers.
And I've even read, through articles of, again, non-spoilery conversations with the game developers, that they were heavily influenced by Sleep No More, for this
interesting.
particular game, which I don't honestly know the context of too much. I can kind of piece it together based on the trailers, but
Lots of death.
maybe. It seems like a lot of,
Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm sure. But a lot of character interactions and choosing which characters you want to follow.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
That sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of amazing to see all of these genres feeding each other and elevating each other and inspiring each other. Hopefully it continues.
Yeah. And I'm also looking forward to Star Wars Episode 8. So I got several more months to go, but, that's fine. I can still look forward to it already.
I think we can all say that. One thing you just mentioned, it's kind of a double-edged sword creating your own show, because you miss out on other shows that come through. It's is there a way to balance that? I think I already know the answer, but would you trade giving up your creation in order to see all of the shows that you missed?
like if we could go back in time almost. Yeah. You mean? I don't know. I mean, I think what we're doing in July will be a good balance where we're taking more nights off throughout the month, so we have opportunities to see other things or just be like a normal human every once in a while. So I think that will be a much better way to go, where we have shows, 3 nights a week, for example, but then kind of a night off. We don't do, I guess a couple of nights off, but 1 night off where other shows are running, where we can see a lot of things. But I don't think going back, although I am sad to have missed it, I wouldn't have said I rather would have not done a show at all, but yes, I definitely wish we had left a few more breaks in there so we could have seen shows. I never saw Johnny Part 3. I saw Parts 1 and 2, but I didn't have a chance to see Part 3, which I'm sure was like the best part. It sounds amazing. It's like, no. So I definitely wish that we had left a couple of days in there to see some other cool immersive stuff in LA.
But again, it's our first show, so we kind of felt like it needed to be full tilt. We had to just crank as many shows out as we could, get as many people to see the show as we could to make that first impression, because I think a big goal for us was to earn people's trust and to show them that we are going to be able to put on a good show and gain those followers for the next bigger and better one, and then so on and so forth. So particularly with the first one, we definitely left no room for real life, which yeah, would be nice, but it was sort of a cost we were willing to take for this first show.
Yes.
You suffer for your craft.
Yeah.
I get it. And this might not have an answer, and we touched on this briefly earlier, but with whatever comes next, do you have a wish list of a date? Like, would it be this year or next year?
I would guess next year. And I think the reason for that is, kind of going back in time and again, talking a little bit about our current show, we probably kicked the idea around in our heads for the Nest for probably like a couple years. And that, I think, makes it seem more than what it was. But it kind of like with any creative process, you kind of like think about something and then you like think about some other stuff for a month, and then like you're driving and like you think of another part of it, and then you throw that all away, and then you like restart from the beginning. And so
95% of the time it's simmering, and then like for 5% it's boiling, and you're talking and you're inspired, and then for 2 months it goes into hibernation, and then it comes back because you're inspired by some show you saw or some book you read or something like that.
Right. So that's kind of why I'm thinking next year. Yeah, because I think we'll probably, again, we have like some ideas in our head, but honestly, they'll probably like completely change or be completely thrown out. And so we'll probably just take like a little bit of time just to like think and let everything simmer.
Yeah, but that being said, I'm sure like with any creative endeavor, it's like you swear off that you won't think about the next project till the first one is done, and inevitably you do. So yeah, we're already talking about the next shows, and we really, really like love a few of the ideas that we have. So we're already sort of like mulling them over more than we probably even ought to. We should just be focusing on the current one. But yeah, it's like you can't help yourself.
And some of them are ideas that we could do potentially like between big shows. So even smaller than the Nest, like very, very micro theater or micro experiences even. That we could do for like a weekend or a short period of time or whatever the case may be, while we're still thinking of what the next real show would be. So something like that might come a little sooner, but I think the next real show probably will be bigger than the Nest and probably would come next year.
But again, it all depends on availability of space and all that. Like with LA, it's like if all the stars align up just perfectly, you never know. But that's at least our idea for now.
Right.
Earlier, you were mentioning the idea of converting people or like people coming through your show that have never quite had an experience like this. I'm going to get on a soapbox for a moment here. I think your show that you created, I think The Nest, is the perfect recruitment, for lack of a better word. Because I think you've mixed genres in a way that is very gentle, completely immersive in a wonderful, enchanting way, and not immersive in you thrust people into a situation and they have to deal with it. You give them the chance to explore, and you give them the chance to find the story themselves. So, from a selfish point of view, I want your show to come back, and I want your show to continue. So I just want to say that, and the fact that
Thank you.
I love what you have created, and I have recommended it to so many people.
Thank you so much.
that
Yeah,
means a lot.
And I
Yeah.
really do believe that it's like you've created something special, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful experience for people who are looking to step outside of their safety zone and step outside of the box that they're used to as far as what theater is, even if they're used to immersive theater. And I think the haunt people that you referenced earlier,
Right.
I think if you're a regular haunt goer, you might have more of a sense of adventure, so
Right.
you're willing to
Right.
explore. But that's a double-edged sword, as Mike used that phrase earlier, in the fact that they come in expecting something like either more aggressive or darker in tone or something like that.
Right.
Sometimes, some of them would, but you've created this thing that is, yes, it's immersive, and yes, it's not dark in tone, but there's almost a haunt feel to it a little bit because of the environment and the fact that you are exploring
Right.
with a flashlight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very
it's
dark
very
and kind of creepy.
There is a
little bit
creepiness
creepy.
element to
Yeah.
it, and the fact that you kind of have to get down on your hands and knees and dig into stuff and find stuff and not climb, because you don't climb.
Yes, that's right.
Never climb on the
Yes.
boxes, people.
Exactly.
But you do have to like you have to look above you and below you and around
Right.
you, and you have to open and explore. And I really do think that what you created is, it's a wonderful transition for those people. It's a wonderful exposure to something different and new and exciting. And look, I've done a lot of escape rooms. I've done a lot of haunts. I've done a lot of theater. And, I walked out, the first time, you saw Mike and we talked to you for a very long time after that first time, because we were just both so enchanted by it.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your support and for your kind words. It definitely means a lot that people have had such a positive reaction and like the show so much. And it has been really interesting, I think, seeing kind of like what you're talking about of a lot of the groups of two that have come through are maybe one person who does a lot of immersive theater, and then they're bringing their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their friend or someone who maybe has never done something or done one thing before, and so they're kind of in a way, a lot of these shows have been a way for someone to kind of like introduce someone that they're close with
It's a good
to
show
what
for it.
this is. Yeah, because I think it's kind of low. There's not a lot of pressure. You don't have to perform in front of other people. You're not in a big group. You can kind of just like be yourselves a little bit. And I think that's why people have been bringing kind of new people into the immersive theater fold when they come to see the show, which
That's
has been
understandable.
great. It's been
Yeah,
great.
and I think
Yeah.
that essence that you so just put so well is a goal that we'll strive to do on even future shows. I think it's really important to keep it at that level for people because, again, like about expanding and making it accessible for all types. It's like you want to cater to both the niche audience and the general audience to hopefully keeping the popularity up and expanding your audience to new people, because I think a lot of people love narrative video games or they love film, and it's like if they would only just try it, they could be drawn in. So hopefully we'll continue to make those types of experience, or at least keep that in mind when designing.
Well, I encourage the nest to run for as long as possible.
No pressure, guys.
Just saying, and just putting it out there in the universe. No.
And piggybacking on everything that was just said, I mean, my mom lives in Massachusetts, and I hope the nest is running when she comes and visits. And my mom's 70 this year.
Yeah.
And it's like this would be so perfect for her because most of the things that Russell and I do aren't really good for
Mothers.
70-year-old mothers.
Yes. Yeah.
But the nest is perfect for that.
Right.
And I mean, have you seen like a lot of parent-child type things, like older like kids bringing their parents and whatnot?
Yeah, my parents just went through yesterday because they were in town.
Oh, really?
Which
Oh, that's
was
awesome.
Yeah, and then we've had a couple parent-child. It was both my parents. They went together. So I was, helping to run the show, so I didn't go through it with them. Plus, I would have known where everything was, so I'd be like, it's there. Keep moving.
Here's the code. Go through.
Just go through. Just get to the end. Here
I'll
it
just
is.
give you the summary.
Yeah. But yeah, we've seen definitely some parent children groups go through. Not children, they're 20-year-old children. And it's kind of like heartwarming in a way, because it's just kind of nice to see kind of the intergenerational kind of like bonding that's happening as they go through. And then one of our friends who helped do one of the secondary voices, she went through and she brought her mother through too. And I think talking to her mother afterwards, and also a couple people who kind of like grew up in that same era, it's almost like they almost like form a stronger connection to Josie too. Like when my mom was listening to all the tapes, she was like, "Oh my God, like this was all the music I grew up to," and like all this stuff. It's definitely like touching, I guess, to see people of all ages go through.
And they all know how to use the cassette player.
Yeah, they're like, "I got this."
Like, we got this. Whereas like we have had a few guests who are on the younger side, early 20s, who have struggled using a cassette player, or are not completely sure what to do with it at first. I mean, it's pretty simple to use it,
yes,
but
it is.
Yeah, it's a bit of a foreign object, I think, for them.
You just mentioned one of the secondary voices and how their friends came through. Did Josie ever come through with people? And Josie is played by Mackenzie Fergans. Did any of her friends come through like with her or without her and be like, "Oh my God, I know that voice"?
Oh yeah, she came through like a week ago.
Yeah, just last week, Mackenzie was able to come see the show, which was really surreal, and I'm sure pretty weird for her, but
right. I think it was kind of interesting too, watching her go through, because since she knew all of the tapes and the story on the tapes, she was finding the tapes, but then not listening to them because she knew they were out of order chronologically, even though we had put them out in that way purposefully. That again, like we talked about at the beginning, some of Josie's later years, you find those tapes at the beginnings, but she would just hold on to them and like be like, "It's not time for that one yet. Like, I know what it's supposed to be." So it was definitely it was funny kind of watching her go through, and she seemed to love it. So
and she did such an amazing job as Josie. I mean, it just worked out so well through Noah Nelson, who referred us to her, and she's so talented, and we can't like speak highly enough for her performance, because we listen to it 6 times a night. And it's like every time we hear it, it's just like, we made such
amazing.
she did such a good job. It worked out just so well.
And she got to hear for the first time her co-star, which is kind of interesting because they never recorded together in the same space. We just edited them together, recorded them 2 separate times, so neither of them had ever heard the other person's part until they came to see the show, which must be a very weird experience for those actors.
And it was very funny because you were talking about just as it was Mike and I went through it, I recognized one of the voices, but I couldn't place it. And it was
probably Tom.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
It was driving me crazy. And then when you told me afterwards, I was like, "Oh, well, of course that's who it was."
Yes,
that's Matthew Bamberg Johnson from the Speakeasy Society, who
Yes.
I know you guys are familiar with.
Yes.
Who have met before. They were on the podcast not too recently, right?
Right.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job too, coming in and help filling that role. And again, just like emotionally connecting with the other characters without ever having even met them, which I'm sure is no easy task. But
I think they just listened to like Jeff's scratch audio in order to hear the other part of it. So it'd just be Jeff like playing Josie, being like, "Oh, hello, like I'm Josie."
That should definitely be released.
Oh my gosh, we talked about that. We listen to it every now and then.
It's so funny. I like laugh. One time, like somehow one of them got mixed in with the other tapes, and so someone during one of the shows near the beginning found one of the scratch audio tapes, and we were like, "Oh my God, wait, what is this? Why does this tape sound so weird?" And that's like,
wow.
Oh my God, it's Jeff, is young Josie. So he's trying to do like a 12-year-old girl voice, and it's like, and we're just like, "Oh God."
That's for the Halloween version when she gets possessed by the devil.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, the whole cast is awesome. We have Evlana Pinelli doing young Josie, and she's actually a coworker who actually plays Josie's father in one of the tapes. So that worked out.
Well,
like,
wow, her
really
dad
well.
is a coworker.
Yeah,
she is not a coworker.
Her father is my coworker, and then it worked out so well. She did such a phenomenal job. Like, she's just like an amazing little actress, and she has a little bit of experience acting, but has never done anything quite like this before, and she just like dove into it. And I don't know if you heard any of the tapes with young Josie, but like, yeah, she just nailed it. It was such a fortunate situation.
Oh, that whole setup tape where she's talking about the tape recorder and the birthday and like
Right.
all of that. Yeah, all of that.
Right, and there's a this also doesn't really spoil anything, but there's a tape where she finds or gets a dog as a present when she's younger, and she just like nails it and is like laughing and giggling, and every time you hear that tape, it's like, oh my god, like she's a legit like child actress. This is amazing.
Yeah, like being our first show, we had budget to fund a few of the actors, but essentially we were calling in a lot of favors throughout the entire production of the show, and with the voice acting cast as well. A lot of the cast are friends and family and people that we know really well who were able to help out and in that way. But yeah, we just got very fortunate in that everybody just meshed so well together.
Right. Have we covered everyone?
Yeah, I mean, we have other people: Claire Weiss, Kyla Frazier, Michael Overman, and Mark Pinelli, who all helped with voices. But yeah, and those are all friends,
Right.
and
Which was
coworkers
great.
and stuff, which was cool to collaborate on.
And I think we can't leave out a very important person also, which is our technical director, Michael Alardi, who I will not. If someone comes and sees the show, they can ask us afterwards what he did as technical director. I'll tell you guys after the podcast. You probably know.
Yeah, it
you
is a
probably
very
know.
low-tech show, but there are a few elements that are hidden.
Hidden high-tech moments that you wouldn't necessarily know about. And then Sheldon Bachin doing PR and Kyla Frazier doing social media. So that was our little
Our ragtag little group.
gang. Yeah.
You just mentioned something that you've heard. You hear the stories, then you hear the tapes 6 times a night. Are you ever surprised at this point because you've heard them so many times by new combinations?
Yeah, because I mean, there are certain ways that people tend to consume the tapes, and by that I mean that they find them in more or less a similar order, with every now and then finding 1 or 2 tapes out of sequence. But every once in a while, yeah, there are people who will find or just choose for whatever reason to listen to certain tapes in a different order that I think can really impact how you view the character. Again, yeah, like we can't go into exact details. This all probably sounds like very like
Secretive.
secretive.
It's not really that secretive or crazy. It's just we don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, but if you happen to listen to a couple tapes out of sequence, it could drastically, I think, shape the way you interpret the story.
And I think by this point, after listening to them so many times, we have them like all memorized. Like we just like can say them out loud as they're going in the room. So it's just kind of fun. Yeah.
Going off what you said about listening to tapes out of order, it can drastically change the story. Did you go into creating these tapes with that specific purpose, or was it a happy accident that it ended up that way? Or
Definitely, I think in writing them, it was a balancing act of trying not to reveal certain aspects of the plot while still giving you bits of information here and there. So it was about creating these moments in time of Josie's life that didn't necessarily ruin any other part, or that at least had little callbacks or little connections and threads here and there between multiple tapes, little details that carried throughout that, depending on the order that you found them, you might connect the dots a little differently.
Right. And anytime I call back to a different tape, it would be specific enough that you would know what she meant if you had heard the tape that it was referencing, but general enough that if you hadn't, it would still kind of make sense. Like there's this one line, again, I don't think this ruins anything, but where she says, I didn't mean to hurt him. And so, if you just hear that out of context, it's like, did she physically hurt someone? Did she emotionally hurt someone? What does that mean? And if you found, a couple other tapes that might describe what that meant, but even if you didn't find that, it still all kind of makes sense with the context of the story.
It's funny that you go to that line because I remember that line very specifically.
I do too, especially with you. No, like when we went through, like
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
Right,
we tried to
right.
pepper in a few of those lines that, depending on what you found, would drastically change the meaning of that, right? It's the whole like the right placement of a comma or the right placement of context on or emphasis on a particular line based on what you found might influence you more than someone else who didn't find it, and that passes them by and means nothing to them.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
It makes me want to go back again.
Yeah.
It really does. It's just because every time it will be different because of the order of the tapes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and then there was also sort of this challenge of making sure that the basic story beats are all explained in the core story tapes, the ones that are easier to find, so that even if most people that leave, I would say, have the same gist of the story, it's just all those dots in between that are a little bit different.
And totally different interpretations, I think, of what happens at the end of the story, which it is kind of supposed to be open-ended a little bit, but obviously going in that Josie has passed away, but even at the end it's like the different ways that might have happened, or maybe she didn't, and maybe just the county for some reason thinks she did, or there's not really any right or wrong answer to it, but it's just left very open-ended and people have totally different interpretations.
Is there anything about this experience that you want to say or cover that we haven't covered already?
Take it away, Jeff. No,
I need to think about that for a second.
Because this is your first show. You've said that several times. So it's like,
Right.
what's your takeaway? Congratulations, and I hope it was an adventure. But I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Well, I mean, our personal takeaway as a hopefully growing immersive theater company is just taking a project from inception to completion, and everything in between. We have a specific set of skills that we brought into this whole journey, but coming out of it, I feel like we've learned so much just because only being two of us, we have to do everything ourselves. I mean, yeah, we've had a lot of help with a lot of the sort of things like technical directing and social media and stuff. We've had assistance there, but in terms of building the show and writing the show and getting the actors and piecing it all together and the design of the space, that's just been Jarrett and I, and we've just learned so much by actually forcing ourselves to put on a project and put on this show. I think a lot of people have this sort of aspiration to do something like this, or they think they've got an idea for a long time, but it just takes so much more than you can even comprehend to do this yourself, and there's no better way to do it than to just force yourself to jump into the fire and go for it, because you learn so much along the way and so many things you can't even see ahead of time,
Right.
but that you learn to deal with, and you make the most out of it.
Right. And it kind of also, I think another thing kind of based on what you said, it reminds me of this quote I heard, like someone was telling me it like a year or two ago, and now it's like one of my favorite quotes. It's in Tina Fey's book. I love Tina Fey. And it's from, I love this quote so much I can't even remember the guy who said it. The SNL producer, like the main
Lorne
SNL
Michaels?
host. Lorne Michaels talking to Tina Fey, and she is trying to work on some sketch or something like that, and he goes to her and is like, Tina, it's not done because it's funny. It's done because it's 11:30. And so I think that is like such a good lesson. I mean, I think that goes back to like everything in like theme park design and like in our day jobs. We sometimes are forced to like iterate over and over and over again to try and make something perfect, when like at the end of the day, it's like, no, we just gotta move forward with the best information we can. I think also applies to small shows is, you with any creative endeavor, you never accomplish everything that you want to do. There's always more, but at a certain point, it's just like, okay, this piece of it is done, and we got to move on to the next piece and the next piece, and we got to get all the way to the end, because if we could spend months just perfecting one element, but that doesn't make a very good show. We have to kind of keep a big picture and kind of drive towards an overall finish. So that definitely was another example of that same quote being lived out in my life, and now I like that has another example why this like my favorite quote ever. It's like, we just gotta do it. We gotta move forward.
And to that too, it's like learning just to embrace design constraints and challenges from all aspects of the show and turning them around and leveraging them to your advantage. Like, okay, you have a small space. It's tiny. That's fine. That's awesome. How can you best use that? How can you best take advantage of that? That shouldn't be seen as a disadvantage. That should be seen as a gift in many ways. Or to keep that mindset and try to keep moving forward on the constraints that we have and trying to turn them around somehow.
Right. And I think also like all of that being applied to anyone who's interested in doing their own show or a haunt or escape room or whatever the case may be. It's just the time is never perfect to do it, but just, just do it. Like, just do it. You'll be happy you will. You'll probably you probably won't have a lot of social life for a while, but like just try it and it will work out. If you like put your heart into it and if you like work really, really hard, it will end up being cool. So definitely encourage anyone who wants to, start their own thing, to just go for it.
That's great. Inspirational words. Thank you both. And you just reminded me of another quote is, deadlines don't stifle creativity. It encourages it.
Oh, definitely.
Because if you're open-ended and you never have the deadline, you'll never finish.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for talking. Before you guys leave, we have actually one really important question that we have to cover. It's like, I don't know if you've listened to the My Haunt Life podcast. It's quite all right if you haven't.
No, I have. I think I know what's coming, but I'm not sure.
The important question is, are you Team Snickers or are you Team Kit Kat?
Kit Kat.
Oh my God.
Do I get to eat this?
This is not an easy choice. I don't take it lightly, but I'm going to have to go.
I know, I feel like I'm in a Kit Kat mood, but I wouldn't say all the time that I would be pro
Depends on the
Kit Kat.
day, but you know what? I would say most consistently, most of the time I'm Team Snickers. So a good even split.
He knows what's up.
I'm not supposed to eat it.
Thank you very much. This is an ongoing conversation that Mike and I have, both on and off the record. No, we just like to get input every now and then.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
So
It's fun
one
to
each
eat.
this evening, sir.
Yes.
Is there a constant tally somewhere in this room
we
that
should
you've got
have
going?
one.
Yeah,
You should put up a dry erase board.
Oh, yeah.
With the big tally marks,
I must
scratching
admit,
in chalk.
Yes, actually, very good idea. I even though I am Team Kit Kat, I must say I believe that the tally board would lean toward Team Snickers.
Well, especially after the Creep LA interview, because they had one of the cast members for the production team for the Willows was working on a Snickers commercial, and that's why she couldn't come
make the interview.
to the interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. So everyone had to say Snickers contractually.
It is
Like
so
the Willow sponsored by Snickers.
it is so not an easy black and white decision, though. There's so much nuance to that question.
There really is.
Maybe, and also like Twix. Like, I don't know.
Okay, but
like,
that's not the
Twix is-
question.
I know, but no, just
peanut butter Twix or caramel?
caramel.
Well, caramel, obviously.
And like
guys,
Reese's,
come on.
obviously. This is like a Pandora's box
Yeah.
that has just been unleashed upon
It's
the
a
world.
slippery slope to dive down.
By the way, Mike, I'm totally with you, peanut butter, on that one.
We should probably have a candy debate podcast,
Oh yeah,
like a
Yes,
spin-off.
hi, welcome
about-
to the candy.
peanut butter M&Ms. Those are definitely
Yes.
the best type of M&M.
That's my crack.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Oh my
crispy
God.
ones
he's
are
not
pretty
kidding.
good too.
He's not kidding.
He pounds them up into dust.
I really do. Like, it's just by the handfuls. I don't eat meals because I eat so many of them sometimes.
Just those like giant red bags with the handles that you
Oh,
can get
yeah.
at Costco that are like the 5-pound sack.
I had no, totally with my permission. I did have some in the house when Mike arrived tonight. I no longer have any. Just
Oh, okay.
there was, but there was only
okay.
like 3 left in there.
oh, really? There wasn't more than that?
No.
Okay, then I must have. I must have almost finished them off. So
I feel like with Snickers, not to keep like diving into this, but like Snickers is definitely like it's more of like a meal. It's like I
Yeah.
can sustain myself for longer on a Snickers. While with a Kit Kat, and I love Kit Kat too, it's like it is more of like a candy bar treat,
Like a
little
palate
snack.
cleanser.
Yeah,
like a little little nightcap.
candy treat. Whereas like Snickers, it's got like
I'm so glad
peanuts
you
in
guys
it.
are game for this conversation
It is
because that is-
hearty.
yes. Actually, that's kind of how this all began. Is I made a comment about Snickers being too sweet for me sometimes. So, and that's Kit Kat is more subtle. It's understated. It's got more finesse and grace. That's the truth.
Oh, right.
But it is
Oh, yeah.
very simple.
Yeah, I mean, Snickers satisfies. I mean,
Trademark TM. TM.
Yeah. Well, really, you should just delete everything you recorded before, and we should just continue on this for the next couple hours. Delete all that other crap about the show,
And look, and then the next conversation is jerky, but that's like
Oh, don't even. Yeah.
or cake. I always have a debate on cake versus pie.
Oh, that's not even a question though.
Well, what is your answer?
pie.
No, it's cake.
Oh no.
it's
Cake.
whatever is in front of you.
But if I had a cake and a pie, I would go for the
pie.
But you have two hands.
Well, I would go for the cake first with both hands.
I'd have to say that I'm more of a cake person.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. Kit Kats and cake. We have two things in common. Yeah.
A good apple pie with a nice,
that's
like
true.
sugary crust.
I totally get it. I totally get
yeah.
it. But I'm a little more of a cake person. So
I won't make
Yeah.
any jokes about that.
please don't.
The important things in life.
Exactly.
Yes.
See, thank you. You guys are more game for this conversation than most people who we ask this question of. That's awesome. So, thank you guys so much for stopping by and talking with us. We like from the first time that we met you guys at the show that you totally won us over, and we thoroughly enjoyed the Nest, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the run, the extension.
Thank you.
When you remount the show, because it has to come back. That's the way it is. That's just the universe needs it. And for everything else that's coming from Scout Expedition Company.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
You. And before we end this, can you give all of your websites and social media and everything where people can find you?
Yes. So we'll give one more plug. Again, the tickets for our July shows are going on sale June 18th. The newsletter to sign up for the pre-sale is at www.thenestshow.com. And you can find us online on Twitter at Scout Expedition, and then Instagram and Facebook at Scout Expedition Co.
Well, thank you guys so much, and good luck with everything that you have going on.
Thank you. This
Thanks.
was great. Thank you.
All right.
Hey everybody, it's Jarrett again from Scout Expedition Company. There's one more piece of news that came in after we recorded this podcast. On Sunday, July 30th, we're going to be teaching a class on designing immersive environments at this year's Midsummer Scream Convention. Using lessons from the Nest and our previous work in immersive theater, we're going to share our design process, from initial idea all the way through production. We'll also discuss how to convey story through physical objects, use the design of a space to affect audience psychology, turn challenges into storytelling opportunities, and a whole lot more. It'll be great for anyone who's interested in the design process of haunts, immersive theater productions, and other types of walkthrough attractions. For details and tickets to the convention, head over to www.midsummerscream.org, and remember that our class will be on Sunday, July 30th. Hope to see you there.
So again, thank you to Jeff and Jarrett for coming onto the podcast and speaking with us about the Nest and the Scout Expedition Company. It was such a good talk.
It's really nice to hear people who are just starting out and their creative process. I love this show, and I know, Mike, you and I both had such a good time when we went through it. It was really interesting to hear some of the creative process going into it, and God, I wish them well. I just, like, whatever they do next, I'm in.
Yeah, I really hope it does extend longer.
Yes, I agree.
It would be amazing if this could find a permanent place somewhere. Yeah, because more people need to see this. Like, this is going to be used for inspiration, like, throughout the years.
Yeah, already, I mean, among our haunt and immersive theater friends, it is being heralded as sort of like one of the shows of this year just because of its unique premise and the way it unfolds. It's awesome.
Agreed.
And that wraps us up, right, Mike?
Yep.
All right. So thanks for listening. I'm Russell.
And I'm Mike.
See ya.
Well, you had another good question, so...
I did.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go right into it.
Let me go to the paperwork.
I didn't want to steal your thunder.
So, no, steal away. Go ahead. This is how the podcast gets made.
I love it.
Just leave this all in there.
So
It'll be
we
perfect,
awkwardly
yeah.
turn to each other and go, what?
You would never know from listening to it. So